The Glorious Rákóczi Liberation Struggle by Gustav Heckenast. Source: Suomi-Unkari Magazine, 1953, issues 6-7. This year, the liberated working people of Hungary celebrate the 250-year anniversary of the outbreak of the Rákóczi liberation struggle. 250 years ago, in 1703, on the 12th of May, Ferenc Rákóczi II sent from the castle of Breza his famous proclamation, quote, "To all true Hungarians, those who love our homeland and our dear country's old glorious freedom, those belonging to the clerical or secular estates, nobles or commoners, to rifle-bearing or civilian true Hungarians," unquote, calling them to arms against, quote, "the cruel regime that is madly autocratic, bothersome, taxing, degrades our freedom of nobility, despises our severe old laws and rights, takes our property, tramples our honor, steals our meat and bread, and lives in opulence at the cost of our lives," unquote. The position of the Hungarian people in those days was a sad one. Our homeland was then a colony of the Habsburg conquerors. The country's leaders, the secular and clerical upper nobility, became servants of the Habsburg policy of domination. For their own selfish motives, they betrayed their homeland. The largest part of the ruling class, the landowning nobility, was ground up between two millstones, suffered severely from the alien domination, but was more fearful of their own serfs than of the emperor's hirelings. The peasantry was the first to rise up against the invader, which was imposing terrible burdens on the people. Various peasant movements demonstrated the brave determination, courageous ingenuity of our people, but they didn't achieve results in battle against the combined forces of the foreign conquerors and the Hungarian lords that had entered their service. The Kurucs peasant movement had to be developed into a broad liberation movement based on national unity. All forces that agreed to rise up against the Habsburgs had to be united. The liberation struggle needed a leader enjoying the necessary prestige, both home and abroad, to lead the movement for independence. Tamás Ese and Albert Kiss, leaders of the peasants of Tiszahat, asked Ferenc Rákóczi II, the son of the heroic Ilona Zrínyi, a descendant of the leader of previous anti-Habsburg struggles. The 27-year-old Ferenc Rákóczi had already been preparing the liberation struggle against the Habsburgs for years. He was the largest landowner in Hungary. Allying first with other landowners and supported by the King of France, Ludwig XIV, and the Polish nobility, he planned to take up arms for the freedom of his country. Because of an informant, he was imprisoned and only after many difficulties was able to escape to Poland and avoid his death sentence. There he encountered the invitation of the Kurucs peasants. Ferenc Rákóczi did what no other Hungarian prince before or after him dared to do, took up the leadership of the rebellion of peasants and small gentry, began the glorious Kurucs liberation struggle. With good reason he could write in his memoirs, quote, "The goal of all my actions was exclusively the love of freedom and the hope that I might liberate my homeland from the foreign yoke. I was encouraged and strengthened by the desire to win the confidence and love of my people," unquote. Even after many years, the first Kurucs Knights demonstrated the enthusiasm and self-sacrifice of the people. Quote, "Numerous sons of Hungary took up arms, with their hearts aflame, to defend their right," unquote. First to join under the Kurucs flag were the Hungarian and Carpatho-Ukrainian serfs of Upper Tisza, but soon even the sons of the most distant parts of the country enrolled into the camp of Rákóczi. As the serfs of Maroszek wrote, quote, "Also we, poor burdened serfs, are on our merciful Lord's side, ready to serve the prince and the country for the rest of our lives," unquote. Even in enemy-controlled territories in the rear of the emperor's army, the serfs, propertyless peasants and impoverished small gentry, who had almost sunk to serfdom themselves, declared themselves Kurucs as soon as they got their hands on a gun. Thus, quote, "What Albert Kiss began with 70 men in April grew in May to 700, in July to 7,000, and in December to 70,000, unquote. In the ranks of the Kurucs fought side by side Hungarian, Carpatho-Ukrainian, Slovak and Romanian serfs, as they were all oppressed by Habsburg rule and the cruel exploitation by the nobility. The poorly armed, ragged peasant soldiers carried out fantastic deeds of heroism, motivated by patriotism, bravely looked hardship straight in the eye, and again forced the enemy to retreat. The results gained by the rebels caused even the middle-sized nobility to consider the situation, and so they also joined Rákóczi. Finally, those princes whose estates were in the liberated areas found it best to join the side of the Kuruts. Due to the great number of the serfs and the successes won by the peasant soldiers, there emerged a broad national unanimity. Serfs and nobles, bourgeois and urban poor, that is, all sections of Hungarian society united in the same camp. The results of the national unity, born in the name of the liberation of the homeland, appeared quickly. The Kuruts soldiers, led by Rákóczi, liberated most of Hungary from Habsburg rule in a few months. Immediately after joining the Kuruts forces, the nobles took over the leadership. A person from the masses could enter their ranks only as an exception, despite the fact that, as Comrade Mihaly Farkas says, quote, "The peasant forces led by Tamás Esse, the initiator of the Kurut struggle, and by Botyan Vak, drove out the forces of the best Austrian generals of that time, while at the same time the aristocratic generals proved unsuited for their positions. Among them, according to the words of Rákóczi, quote, there wasn't a single one who didn't deserve a serious but justified punishment because they didn't follow my orders," unquote. And it was most of all due to the mistakes of the commanders that the Kuruts army, despite all its brilliant victories and successful battles, was unable to give the enemy the decisive blow. Acquiring weapons, food and reserves for the army proved very difficult for the country, weakened by centuries of struggle against the Turks and exploited by the Habsburgs. As the provider of the material prerequisites of the 8-year-long liberation struggle, Rákóczi rises into the ranks of the greatest Hungarian organizers. Silver and copper mines, saltpeter works, iron foundries, gun and ammunition factories, fabric cutting workshops, and workshops manufacturing military uniforms all made their products for the needs of the army. The organization and uniting of the anti-Habsburg forces was served by the enacting of the Union of Hungarian Statuses and Estates at the 1705 Széchenyi Diet, and the electing of Ferenc Rákóczi II as the leading prince was a guarantee the liberation struggle would continue. To his people he was a hero of Hungary's independence struggle, who feared no sacrifice, who loved his people from the bottom of his heart, and looked with genuine sympathy towards the peasantry's social requirements. Ferenc Rákóczi's contemporaries compared him with good reason to the great ruler of a powerful centralized Hungarian state, the just King Mátyás. During the first year of the liberation struggle, the international situation was quite favorable for the struggle for independence. The Habsburgs were engaged in a burdensome war against Ludwig XIV of France for the crown of Spain. The English and Germans tried to mediate between the emperor and Rákóczi, but in every negotiation they represented the interests of the court in Vienna. It would have been possible for Ludwig XIV, who was fighting a war against the Habsburgs, to make alliance with the Hungarians, but the quote-unquote Sun King considered it lowering his dignity to ally with a rebellious population fighting for its independence. Rákóczi's liberation struggle achieved its best victories in these years. By combining French military science and the traditional Hungarian way of fighting, Botyan Vak liberated Dunántúl in 1705 with a powerful military expedition. In 1705, heroic peasant soldiers reconquered Erdély, which had been lost because of the almost treasonable disobedience of a few aristocrat generals. On Rákóczi's suggestion, the Diet of 1707 in Onod stripped the Habsburgs of power and declared Hungary a republic. After these events, Rákóczi's liberation struggle gained its greatest foreign policy successes. In the autumn of 1707, Tsar Peter the Great, who was resisting the Swedish invasion, formed an alliance with Ferenc Rákóczi II. In 1707, the year of great political successes, signs of weakening, stagnation, however, started to appear. The copper money, which Hungary, relatively backward in comparison with its enemies, had minted to cover costs of the war, was gradually losing value. Inflation weighed heavily especially on the working people, the serfs and the urban poor. Rákóczi said, quote, "The aristocracy has day by day more successfully being able to win back its power over the serfs. To make them work for their own purposes, it dissipated their desire to fight the war." Unquote. The reactionary movement of the clergy and upper nobility, which had opposed the liberation struggle from the beginning, was strengthened during the years of stagnation, but probably even more dangerous were those nobles who carried out treasonable activities in the camp of the liberation struggle. Sándor Károly, Simon Forgách, and other generals leading the Kurucsi troops were able to weaken the forces of the liberation struggle. The Catholic clergy gave direct aid to Habsburg intrigue. The Pope himself published letters of warning to the clergy, quote, to recognize the emperor as the legal ruler of Hungary, unquote. The basic reason for the stagnation and failure of the liberation struggle was the unfavorable development of the international situation. Comrade Rákóczi has said, quote, "The Hungarian people have lost the liberation struggle nearly every century. The Rákóczi rebellion, on the flag of which was written the slogan Pro Libertate, for freedom, was lost. The 1848-49 liberation struggle lost. Even the revolution of 1919 was defeated. All these defeats have primarily been due to foreign reactionary forces, which came here from abroad to help Hungary's internal enemies. Not the country's own internal weaknesses, but most of all unfavorable changes in the international balance of forces defeated the Hungarian liberation struggles for 3 centuries, unquote. Because of the victory of the Habsburgs and their allies against King Ludwig XIV, they were able to send more and more imperial troops to fight against the Kurucs. Contrary to his promises, the King of France abandoned the Hungarian liberation struggle. Tsar Peter I, on the other hand, who could have and had wanted to aid Rákóczi, was fighting a struggle of life and death against the state of Turkey, which the Swedish invaders and the government of England had urged to attack Russia. In the spring of 1711, at a time when Rákóczi was traveling to meet Tsar Peter I to request aid, Traitor General Sándor Károly surrendered to the emperor in Majteni. The Peace of Szatmár made Hungary a Habsburg colony for a long time. The traitors sold the country's independence so that in return they could keep their own privileges and, by the mercy of the emperor, to further enrich themselves. Rákóczi never recognized the Peace of Szatmár. He traveled through Poland to France and later to Turkey into voluntary exile. He fought for Hungary's independence his whole life. Even in exile, Rákóczi was a constant threat to our people's subjugators. Germans in Hungary and Hungarian lords who served the Habsburgs trembled from his memory even after his death. But the working people of Hungary, on the contrary, and also the Hungarian, Carpatho-Ukrainian, Slovak and Romanian peasants, lovingly guarded Rákóczi's memory and waited for his return even after his death, so he could take the leadership of the ever-strengthening peasant struggles. Despite its defeat, the liberation struggle of Rákóczi became a tradition which was a tremendous source of strength and encouragement for resistance. The distant shining of the Rákóczi liberation struggle illuminated the 18th century that had been covered in darkness by the oppressive Habsburg yoke. For a long time our peasant class awaited for the return of the Kurucsi times. The best of our intelligentsia worshipped the memory of the Rákóczi liberation struggle. The Rákóczi march of Liszt and Erkel, the drama of Edes Ligeti, the poem Rákóczi by Sándor Petőfi, the Rákóczi Legion, they all demonstrate the mobilizing power of the Kurucsi period. But only now our liberated people truly know and celebrate with respect the liberation struggle of our forefathers, now that the people of Hungary, quote, for the first time in centuries, can freely control its own resources, culture, and when for the first time in centuries its neighbors do not try to prevent its rise, but support it and the international situation is favorable, unquote. The help of the Soviet Union and our people's unshakable position in the struggle for peace secures the sovereignty of our country, the freedom of our people. In the words of Comrade Rákóczi, quote, that for which the Kurucsis of Rákóczi fought in vain, for which the patriots of Kossuth and the Red Soldiers of 1919 struggled for in vain, the achievement of those goals has now been made possible for us by history. Rákóczi and his Kurucsis remain in the eternal grateful memory of our people. They teach us to take new actions. They teach us to constructive patriotism and encourage millions of liberated Hungarians. Unquote.